Hi, I'm Daniel Sandner.
And I'm Matthew McLaughlin, and we have some notes for Mufasa.
Say it again. Mufasa. Ooh.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first ever episode of the
I have notes.
I Have Notes podcast thing. We don't know if it's a podcast.
We'll just go with like video cast, and maybe it'll be a podcast.
Video cast, I like it. So the idea is we want to get more movies watched per year. So we are going to movies pretty much every week. We figured since we talk about them all the time after watching the movies, that we would just turn the cameras on, see what happens, and see if it's worth anything.
And we have no experience in anything like this, but we figure as filmmakers, it's kind of our duty to watch movies, to keep our knowledge of them up, to stay sharp in the skills of storytelling. So we, going into this, know that we have no actual expertise that gives us anything but our own personal opinions to this. So we will just be speaking from the heart, not as anyone who knows more than, I guess, the average viewer, maybe more of an appreciation.
Indeed, indeed. We will be experts in our opinions, and at the end of the video cast, I like that, we will be giving a ranking on the movies that we watch. So basically, Daniel will have some allotted points, I will have some allotted points. We will combine those and give you the score at the end, and you can find that score on Letterboxd. We are OTW Video on Letterboxd. But yeah, we'll be giving the score on Letterboxd so you guys can see what our opinions are on the movies, and then we also have personal ones. That's its own deal. But this week's movie is Mufasa, the Lion King. And let's get started. What were your first impressions?
I'll be honest, I really didn't want to like this movie.
You're saying that.
I have such a problem with the live action Disney remakes, even though this one was, I guess, fully animated, where they are just not necessary. And when I heard that there was a Mufasa, prequel coming out, I figured that could be pretty interesting. But then I saw, after seeing The Lion King, the remake one, and really not liking it, between the emotionless animals and the just general unoriginalness of it. It just was a rehash of the original with a few extra scenes and some new music. It just didn't give me high hopes for Mufasa. And so when it was released, I'm like, okay, this could be really interesting if they go the right way. And then I heard it was going to be a musical. Yeah. And then I was like, I was watching the trailers. It was this really light, fluffy kind of thing. And that's not what I think about when I think Mufasa, personally. And so, when we went and saw it, and it was surprisingly compelling. Like, it was
I would
unique.
say the same thing. I really wasn't expecting to like this movie at all. Went to go see it because, it's one in theaters. We were kind of expecting to dunk on it a little bit. I know we talked
100%.
about that.
Yeah.
And I know we wanted to invite my fiance and everything, and she's a big Lion King fan, so that was another reason for seeing it. But I was definitely in the same boat. I really was. That first Lion King remake, let's call it what it is. It's not a new idea or anything. And
not at all.
I would say that
frame by frame remake.
Yes, they killed it in the worst possible sense of the word. That original one, let's do this. The first animated Lion King, absolutely amazing. Everybody agrees on that.
Total masterpiece, yep.
It's freaking perfect. Then they go and decide to make the characters absolutely devoid of life. They make everything muted. There's no saturation, nothing. Sure, it looks like National Geographic, but I don't think that's what the spirit of the Lion King is.
Yeah, their intention definitely was just to make a pretty, VFX flex.
Yeah, it was like to flex.
There you go, exactly.
It's just a flex.
It just was a VFX flex to be like, hey, look what we can do.
We have powerful computers here at Disney.
And don't get me wrong, it was a pretty movie.
It was,
and it was filmed like a Nat Geo documentary. Like, it was pretty, and it in that way it had a unique feel and a unique life to it. But then you have the anthropomorphic lions who are supposed to be talking and emoting and acting, and nothing. You had like Polar Express eyes, to where it's just lifeless eyes and lifeless expressions. And like Simba loses his father during the stampede, and he's like, "Father." No.
Oh, man.
Nothing.
Oh.
Nothing in the face.
Gee.
Yeah, gee willikers, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I think in that way, Mufasa really, they heard the audience and they stepped up to it.
I agree with that.
And it was to a point where in the trailers, I was concerned they were going to be too much. They weren't.
I agree.
I didn't think they were.
I wonder if they toned it down, because
I wonder too.
I remember seeing the same thing. It really looked like they went full expressive, like playing around with all of the different facial structures.
Yeah, to an animated extent.
Yeah. So it makes me wonder if it was a Sonic the Hedgehog thing, where maybe people responded to that, and maybe it was like, hey, well, thank you for doing this. You did actually listen to your
listening
customers
to your audience, Disney. Yeah.
for the first time in a decade.
Long
seems
time.
like. I don't know if they did that, but when we were watching the movie, it was definitely much better in the facial region than I was expecting.
Yeah.
It wasn't too far. It wasn't crazy uncanny like I remember from the trailers, like you were talking about. I was very surprised.
Me too.
There was enough emotion.
Like the villain, for example. I don't remember his name, but the Mads Mikkelsen villain was very emotive. I mean, he had a lot of the classic like Scar-isms from the original one, the sneer and the crazy kind of Cheshire cat smile, and he had a lot of emotions. I think the only ones who didn't was like Taka's father. When he would get mad and stuff, he was pretty deadpan. Some of them were kind of lacking, but his mains were good.
His character kind of didn't work for me either. It made sense because he wasn't a good leader, and that's I think the point. Maybe that's why I just didn't like his character, which in that case it worked. But I don't know, the voice didn't fit for whatever reason.
There were a few of those characters. Yeah. Okay, so let's line it up this way. So what we liked about Mufasa? What were its strongest assets? What were things that surprised us? Things that we loved. What were some things that you really liked about Mufasa?
I would say number one actually is the story. I it would have been so easy to just do cameos and the classic Disney tropes of we're not doing an original story, we're just doing a cash grab. And this didn't feel like that to me. It actually felt like a story that the audience hadn't been told, and this was worth telling. And I felt like that sitting in the chair as it unfolded on screen. I remember thinking like, oh man, so his parents were not royalty? I didn't know that. You know, Mufasa's parents, I didn't know that they weren't royalty. I didn't know he wasn't like royal blood or whatever for the story. I didn't know that he had this tragic thing that happened that separated him from his family. We haven't said it yet. Spoilers ahead. 3, 2, 1. They find his mom later in the movie, of course, and it was kind of a sad moment because it was just enough time passed to where yes, you get to see your parents again, but his father had passed away, and it was a tragic thing within good stuff. There were some real emotions there. His journey made sense to me. It worked for me. So I would say the story was one. I was looking forward actually to hearing a story because he is such a crazy masculine character. He's somebody that everybody looks up to, who knows how to lead, who protects, who shows the balance of life and everything like that. So seeing how somebody can go from, nothing, losing your family, to rising up to be the king of the Pride Lands, it's really cool. So I would say the first thing that I really liked was the story itself. I think they executed it pretty well, and I would say that it was worthwhile to tell it. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. I was pleasantly surprised by the depth of the story. Yeah, you're right. Like Mufasa is a character that's not only kind of mythical, but held in such high esteem in the original movie that, a lot of movies you don't really want to pull back the curtain because there's just, like, for example, the Han Solo movie. Like, there's a certain mythos to someone like Han Solo that it's better that way. In the case of Mufasa, I don't think it really hurt him narratively to pull back the curtain and to explore how he became the way he was. Because there's a lot of things that you wonder when you watch the original Lion King, like, why does he just have like this, not only whole pride, but the entire Pride land, everyone who lives in it is just like fine with him. Like, he's a lion that in theory kills and eats like the gazelles, and yet they all go bow down to him. So so there's stuff like that, not to mention Pride Rock and Scar. Like, there's some cool stuff there, and they went into it nicely. I mean, I was worried about the whole Scar inception, especially when it came to hearing that Mufasa was essentially orphaned, washed up on the river. He was taken under Scar's wing, under Taka's wing, and his family's wings. And I was worried that, for a while there, and especially in the movie, you were cheering for Taka because he was, reasonable. He was taking this lion under his wing, and he was, trying to be the best prince he could be, essentially, to be the new king of his pride. And for a while there, I was like, oh, how are they going to do this? This is gonna be weird. But
it would have been too easy to mess up.
it could have.
Really
But they did it pretty delicately, I thought, where they. Granted, it was kind of the classic, oh, you stole my girlfriend kind of thing. Yeah. And I thought they could have built that a little bit better, like given Taka more chances with Sarabi to commingle a little bit, to show that awkward interaction. Like they had unawkward interaction, but that was about it.
Yeah.
And so a little more like try fail would have been good to solidify that, oh, he really is interested. And there was a little bit of that, but generally speaking, that arc was interesting. It was compelling as to why he turned. And then, to your note on the mom, I kind of wish he would have just stayed dead.
Honestly, that wouldn't have been bad.
Need to come back. I didn't think, except to say your father lives in you, to say the classic line.
No, I don't think it was a necessary story beat at all. I think it was done well and like is tragic to see that. But yeah, she didn't need to be at the end by any means.
I think he could have been greeted by his Cloud father, and that would have been just fine.
Dude, Cloud dads are the best.
Yep, Cloud daddy.
So you mentioned basically how different things formed that tied into it. The Pride, the Circle of Life, Pride Rock itself. How did Scar get his scar? All those things. I think generally they did a pretty good job of showing that stuff without it feeling too much like, oh, that's how we got
remember
that.
this?
Yeah, remember this?
Hey, look, nostalgia bait. Yeah, I agree.
Remember berries?
And they're... Well, and no, I thought that several times through the movie. I mean, the introduction of key characters and a little bit of backstory. I was worried for a little while that they were going to be throwing just too many characters and too many backstories in. Like when Rafiki comes into the picture and he's starting to get a little backstory, I'm like, oh, great. Right. But yeah, him getting his staff and the introduction of all of the kind of lines, the whole Circle of Life part of it. Heck, the creation of Pride Rock I thought was interesting.
I usually things like that where it's just like, oh, here you go.
Here it is.
Usually bug me,
right?
And for whatever reason, this one didn't.
It kind of worked. The aquifer thing is weird. Like, oh, so there's this bottomless pit of water inside of Pride Rock that he drowns this guy in.
Drowns him
for whatever reason.
And did you notice too that like the whole story? By the way, I want to rename this entire movie. I really want to rename it. The Secondhand Lion's King or something like that,
Hell, The Shape of Water. Yeah, I felt like water was more of a villain in this movie than the villain was.
Yeah, I was just thinking like, you remember Secondhand Lions and how it's basically a storybook that's being read and they jump in between and the kid interrupts and stuff.
It felt a lot like even like Princess Bride.
Oh yeah, Princess Bride, Secondhand Lions. It was like. Yeah, it was that same thing.
It was.
But
it was well told.
It was, absolutely. Screw Pumbaa and Timon, in my opinion. We'll talk about them in a sec.
We'll talk about that. We'll get to the weak points here in a minute.
As far as, I thought it was interesting, the whole story being told to Kiara by Rafiki, and they were in Pride Rock with the bottomless pit.
So he died.
I know, he's down there still.
His bones are just down there. In our drinking water.
In our drinking water, in what feeds the Pride lands and all the animals.
In the river that supposedly goes out from under Pride Rock,
it's like that kind of changes a little bit, the line, just a little bit. Yeah. It's not the worst, but it's still like there's a giant white lion that just got murdered down there.
A 300-foot pit in the middle of Pride Rock. I thought that was an odd choice. I mean, I could understand his fear of water. Rolling through. I thought it was an interesting story beat to be like, okay, he got swept away by a river. A very Moses-y, a very Prince of Egypt.
It makes sense with the flash floods and everything.
It does.
It fits.
It does. Well, and it just was an interesting reoccurring story beat. I mean, letting him kind of come back to the ties with his parents, missing his parents and trying to figure out who he was. But just the whole end fight being the like, I'm going to fight him in water in I don't know, that pit in Pride Rock just...
I bet you it was
weird.
It was just because they couldn't have Mufasa directly murder him. But then he also just kicks him under the rock, too.
He does. Well, so it's a very Disney ending where it's like the villain kind of kills himself. I mean, it's sort of like Clayton and Tarzan where he hangs himself. And it's brutal, but he does it to himself.
Yeah.
And in the same way, like, he got crushed by a rock underwater. Like, damn. But... just the circumstances of, I mean, the formation of Pride Rock, that was cool. But just this random aquifer, I don't know. That was just a weird thing.
It is weird.
That's right.
And I guess he must have really gotten over his fear of water to choose that as his home.
So other strong suits. Speaking of that, because this kind of ties in. So the VFX, of course, were gorgeous. It was very, in usual fashion, amazingly done. I thought that there was super high fidelity, and the animators being like, "You want us to put the lions in snow and water in this movie
with a sunset going through the snow to have the
What? And then you want Rafiki to lay down in the snow and roll around?
And do a snow monkey?
And then the final fight is in a river and then underwater, and you're like, yeah. So, but the VFX were gorgeous.
Yeah, we need to give a shout out because those
VFX artists work so hard.
My goodness. And it was really cool to see. You could feel the artistry back in it. You really could. It's like we mentioned, the Nat Geo feeling was neat. But man, it felt stale instantly, and it had no saturation.
They just went way too far.
It went way too far.
Yeah.
And in this movie, it's full of color and motion and movement and emotion.
It just was much more cinematic. Yeah. The other one felt documentary. This one felt movie. And I think to good and bad benefits. So I think that as a strong pro, the VFX were gorgeous. I thought the environments felt a little video gamey at times. Like they came up to the mountain range and it was like, oh, or they were on like inside of the Pride Rock Cave when Rafiki and Kiara were, doing their whole thing. It felt like I was in a level of something, Last of Us or Halo or something.
We were playing through Halo. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It felt like I was just in Unreal Engine, just like walking around. And the characters were such high fidelity characters that even like the whole water sequence at the beginning of the movie when everyone's getting swept away, was noisily video game like.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that.
And so like the high fidelity stuff of the characters were even better. There was almost this division because some of the stuff when it was from filming Kiara and Rafiki was down like on the ground, shooting up at them with this really nice bokeh, and it was shallow depth of field, almost like they were filming miniatures. Like the scale was really there, and then it just kind of. I don't know. It yo-yoed drastically between some of those nice realistic grounded shots to like the whole like Robert Zemeckis problem where it's like Polar Express starts on a feather and then it's in the train and then it goes under the train and then the next scene is this really grounded tight locked in shot and then it flies around.
Camera movements for what should be documenting. I know we stylized and stuff, but what's documenting a lion pride and their journey and stuff. Then to have like a Matrix style, a Robert Zemeckis. Yeah. The one that pulled me out the most, I don't even know the movie that's from, but it's Requiem of a Dream. What's that one? It's like the camera's
just the face on. Yeah, they had a lot of like wide angle close-ups.
Every single time. Stylistic choice for sure. Whoever decided that, wrong call in my opinion. Yeah. It's just it wasn't called for there. The only one that worked for me that was that like close-up thing was final-ish fight scene. White lion
jumping at
him. That was cool. Agreed. And it fit because it's how he felt as the lion jumps towards him. But the other ones, I get that it's feeling the elation of running with your new brother and stuff. It just didn't work.
It was very Michael Bay, swoopy aroundy kind of stuff. Yeah.
Don't want to be transported to a Man of Steel and have a crash zoom.
Right.
in the middle.
Exactly. Well, maybe that leads nicely into the cons then, because honestly, that pro of the fantastic VFX outside of some occasional weird things.
Definitely.
Was also, in my opinion, one of my biggest cons for the movie was the just general differences in tone visually, where a lot of the movie was through this like heavy dramatic lens where you were right up in the characters and there was high expressive emotion, and the things that they were doing and talking about had gravity to them or were really pretty, like Rafiki with the fireflies and the sunsets as they're talking to certain characters, things like that were really pretty. And then, you'd go into this like heavily whatever musical number, or you'd go into a shot that's, it's the impossible Zemeckis shots that are just too much. And they pull you completely out of it from being like, why wasn't this just another cartoon? I mean, because at the end of the day, those things are just very cartoony. And so I found myself thinking back to the original Lion King as much as I could, to where there is a lot of that. But it gets away with it because it is fully a cartoon. It knows it's a cartoon. I would say that its gravity in the dramatic beats were more. So the beats with more levity were less. And they
And
they
you're
had a lot
talking
of
in
those things.
the original?
In the
Gotcha.
original animated one. Yeah, not the remake one. The remake one was pretty much all dramatic. I don't remember there being any insane shots in that movie.
No, that was the problem with it too. Not the one we just watched, the remake, of the original.
Yeah, the CGI remake.
Not Mufasa.
Yeah.
CG Lion King.
CG, oh.
Had no levity.
Well, and just trying to think across all the movies in terms of how seriously does Lion King take itself to where, those weird kind of uncanny, unrealistic shots matter. And if you're looking across, the first one, it does have some of that, certainly. You have a whole, luau sequence, for Pete's sake. You have some weird stuff in there. Lion King 1.5 is all about that, so we'll disregard that.
Yeah, a little too far that way.
Lion King 2 took itself a lot more seriously, but then it has the whole, Rafiki Upendi scene where they're, in this mythical land and it's all whimsical. And so you're like, okay. The remake one had none of it, and then this one was kind of a dial and bow. So I think that it worked, but I think they just pushed the envelope a little too hard. I think that there were some shots that were just too much.
Yeah.
And that it was okay to do it occasionally, but they never really stuck to it as being like, okay, we are going to be all dramatic, or we're going to acknowledge that we're stylized and make it more stylized. They didn't really pick one or the other. There's just these peppered in stylized moments that were just a little too far, pretty much every time.
I think two problems. You mentioned that it stems from the CGI is so amazing. It's a great tool, but if you don't apply it in the right way, it can become a limitation. And I think two ways as cinematographers that we see that is through the young scenes when they're running through the river. I thought that was a really cute scene.
Yeah.
I thought that was great. There was a choice to make it seem like the camera had a really, really fast lens on it. I don't know if you noticed that.
It had
the most shallow depth
it was really
of field
shallow, really
humanly
choppy.
Possible.
Yeah, and it looked like a poorly rendered cutscene.
Yeah, and I think that what they were trying to go for is probably
The intensity of it.
The intensity mixed with the childhood elation as if it's a memory. My guess is that's probably what they were thinking, and it just came across cinematographer-wise, video maker, it pulled us out.
Yeah.
It was a great scene again, so well done execution, stylistic choice. I think that hurt them in the long run. The other one for me is just a simple fact of they're trying to emulate camera moves, and unlike the original animated one, you have to have motion blur. And I think there were a few scenes where the motion blur of some panning scenes and everything, it just made it feel kind of muddy, whereas the animated one, everything's clean lines, or they do that, step animation, so it looks like motion blur, but your brain just perceives it really easy. And I think those two things just really made it feel video gamey, like you were talking about. So I think
they
those
couldn't
were
pick a
two
style.
choices. Yeah,
they couldn't pick a style. They were doing these, like I was saying with the nice shallow depth of field, almost filming like miniatures.
Yeah.
Did realistic framing, realistic camera settings, jumping between the whole the camera's gonna follow, because there's the one of him floating in the river and it's gonna follow him under and come up and around and over. It's cool, don't get me wrong. And it's, I guess, one of those traps that maybe cinematographers in that digital realm, like if you're James Cameron or something like that, and you've captured all of it, or in this case, it's all been animated. The scene is done. It's essentially finished. You now have your little motion control camera, and you could walk around the scene and film the scene. And they just get a little too gung ho about being like, oh, well, we could do this, and we could loop around, and we could have this whole sequence never cut, start on their face, and loop around them, and under them, and through the leaves. Right. And when it's juxtaposed to those, nice, realistic, grounded shots, it's jarring.
It is. And for the audience that doesn't hold a camera almost every single day, subconsciously, everybody understands what is possible with a camera. And breaking that, unless you're going hardcore, hardcore Henry, let's go with that.
There you go.
Unless you're going hardcore, it doesn't work. And something's wrong in the audience's brain. Whether you use a camera or not, it's there and you feel it.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of the movie worked. But yeah, those kids scenes, I'm sure they were going for the playful childhood, but it just was too far.
Well, and at the end of the day, they just kind of need to pick a lane. Like, is this an animated movie or is it a live action movie?
Yeah, absolutely.
And is it going to be filmed with the gravity that can come with hyperrealism and animals that are these fully beautifully rendered hyper-realistic creatures, but now doing jarringly cartoon things? I'm sorry, you can't have both. I mean, you need to either have it be something that matches the medium in which you've chosen or embraces the fact that it doesn't. And this one just kind of couldn't pick a lane. Like, it had the beautiful stuff, and then it was juxtaposed with the fully fledged, this is something an animated character would do, where it would, bounce in some ridiculous way, or the camera moves would be some ridiculous way, or some perspective that a real camera just couldn't get.
And I think that is a perfect segue into Timon and Pumbaa. Now,
another thing that this movie didn't need.
We haven't talked about this. Obviously, you mentioned a little bit when you're like going back or right outside the theater, but we haven't talked to each other about Timon and Pumbaa. I'll start with this, and feel free to piggyback. They didn't need to be there. They were so distracting, and neither of them had any emotion in their faces. I get to that you can't really animate a warthog's face because it doesn't have the lips that a lion does, or any of the intensity that you can get.
Right.
So I get why you can't do it, but they stood out as sore thumbs for they were plopped from the CGI remake, and they were dropped into Mufasa, and the jokes were bad. They just didn't need to be there. It would have been so much sweeter if it was just Rafiki getting interrupted by us. It's not Kion. Kion's the little one. By Kiara. If it was Rafiki just getting interrupted by
with
Kiara.
Innocent questions or with
innocent questions.
little
but I
distractions.
thought that Mufasa would blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That would have been so cute. And it would have been so sweet. Like what you do in... what were the movies we talked about
Princess
earlier?
Bride
Princess Bride and Secondhand Lines. It's
Yeah.
the kid who's getting told
Well,
the
and
story.
the interruptions are story enhancing. They're not
Yeah.
story detracting, because that was one of the biggest problems with Timon and Pumbaa. Granted, I don't love Seth Rogen and Billy Eichner a ton.
I'm in
I
the
think they're
same
annoying.
boat.
I think they're just.
Now, if the laugh was in there, it would have been okay.
Gosh, would it have? I don't know. I just, as actors, I don't like them. I think they're annoying humans, so that doesn't help. But their addition as characters, yeah, all they did. I mean, typically, if you have that type of character, they're providing levity to a rough situation. They're doing something that enhances the story in that way, to where maybe something really rough happens, and they need to bring the person back out so there can be kind of a reconciliation moment coming next. The problem was it just cut to them making jokes and fourth wall breaks and things that are popular now in cinema, that it fully detracted, it fully distracted. And so you had this moment that had gravity and that was serious and or frightening or whatever, pulled right back out to them doing these stupid fourth wall breaks, just to jump right back into that and have nothing gained. And really everything lost.
Everything
by two
lost.
characters that griped the whole movie that, oh yeah, we're not the main characters of the story. Freaking right, get out of here.
Yeah.
You're not adding anything to
You're
this.
adding nothing to it. It just felt like...
Not even comedic relief. Like,
Not even.
It wasn't funny. It wasn't annoying.
funny. Pumbaa was less offensive, in my opinion. Not offensive, but just not as bad.
Offensive to the story in terms of
In terms of
hurting it,
quality. Timon feel like he just had to get a line in.
Yeah.
He had to be the last one speaking before it cuts away from him.
Sorry, but unless you can bring back Nathan Lane and I forget the actor.
You're better with the actors'
for
names.
Pumbaa, who had an immensely good chemistry to where they could be not only witty but also charming. You're just not going to recreate that with two kind of just annoying comedians.
Yeah, I'm sorry, modern Disney, but an animated warthog that his whole shtick is that he farts and eats bugs just beat your realistic, probably $20 million warthog that's played by a guy known for smoking weed.
In the original, I mean, they're plot points and they're quirky for the sake of, but they're minimal. They know where that line is. Here, not so much. And I would even argue for that point with Zazu in this one.
Yeah, Zazu, there were a handful of okay, and then the rest was
He just was a
annoying.
little too much. Yeah, because he, at the very least, he was story serving, and it made sense for him to come into this story for, tying into the original. But again, without Rowan Atkinson coming in and actually bringing some charming nature to it, he was just also kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Less so than Timon and Pumbaa, but certainly just they could have cut pretty much all of his quips out and he would have been more likable.
Yeah, the one that I usually hate was the I have a report. It is morning. That is all. That wasn't horrible. I was on the fence.
I appreciated that one because that's a direct cut scene from the original. Morning Report never made it into the animated one, and so they resurrected it for Broadway. And it's one of the best songs in the Broadway musical. I think it's a great song.
Wait, is it not in the animated one?
It's in the deleted scenes.
What?
I don't think it made, unless they've re-released it up to now. But no, it wasn't originally in there.
No kidding.
I think it made the soundtrack, but not the movie.
Because I can I feel like I can picture it. I'm not saying you're wrong, because you're definitely
No,
Disney
it's in there
better
and it's
than I
fully
do.
animated. I just don't remember if it made the theatrical cut when it first came out.
So it was 2000. What did it come out? 95. 95 it
95 or
comes
94,
out,
yeah.
and it might not have.
I
This is the
don't
morning
100% know,
report.
but yeah, I thought it was a clever tie-in, and I think that was a good thing across the board. Is their tie-ins were
Yeah, and then his reports after that one quip, the reports actually made sense. Is like as soon as they got to snow, Zazu was fine for the most part. It was before and after that Zazu was just kind of like
just kind of hey, I'm still here, guys.
And it sounded like the voice actor again was trying to look for time. Like there were a couple lines where he's like screaming and he holds it like 2 seconds too long, and it's like, shut up, are the lions alive?
Well, and okay, so that actually ties in perfectly to one of my other big qualms for the movie was the general lack of driven pace and threat. I thought that that the movie definitely, as soon as they had to run away from his adopted pride, when the new lions came in, outside of the goal of getting to their basically their promised land, I forget what it was called. Outside of that goal, Malele, outside of that goal, there wasn't really any reason for them to be fleeing. There was supposed to be the threat of the other lions, but they never really established themselves as a threat at all. I mean, there was he kind of let the pride murder not his son, but the guy who was with his son. And, so they got the amazing voice talent of Mads Mikkelsen, who sounded great. Everything was well
fantastic.
acted. But he
the
never
White Lion,
showed,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He never showed dominance, like, ever. He came into the new pride and he's like, no, and he sang this stupid song that was really, if anything, a detractor of his scariness.
Yeah, let's talk about songs.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Bye-bye we could come to songs.
Terrible mistake. Why bye-bye?
I don't know.
It doesn't sound threatening.
I don't know. I think they were trying to do the whole, Scar, when he, in his original movie, not his song, but he has a lot of those little, cutesy but threatening quips.
Right.
This didn't work.
No, it didn't. It's not this guy. Scar's not. I guess if we compare
that was supposed
them,
to be his song. It's his Scar song, but it wasn't. But
yeah, like Scar's, it all made sense because he's not a threatening lion. He's a skinny, older lion, and he's not that much of a threat to anybody physically. The white lion in this one is huge. He's absolutely gigantic.
But, see, that's the thing. So Scar's a whole separate story, in my opinion. But the big lion was huge physically. He had a huge pride around him that was the hyena equivalents that were whatever. But there were a couple run-ins that they had with the main characters. There was the whole elephant stampede, which honestly the elephants had more threat, I thought, than the other lions.
It's true.
There was just never a time where they were almost caught. There was never a time where somebody got hurt. There was never a time where the stakes were heightened to the extent that they actually showed a credible threat. Even all the way to the end, I thought. Like even the ending fight, there wasn't really anything. Like he was there to push them along, and not well.
Yeah, would you say there's a lack of shown consequences? Is that kind of the problem?
Shown consequences, shown threat. Like I just felt that the bad guy was weak.
Yeah.
That he was not very present, and when he was not scary. He was a very PG bad guy, but not even like the OG ways. Like you think about Scar, you think about Hunchback of Notre Dame with like Frollo, or you think about even other ones like Rasputin and Anastasia or something, where those are all PG movies from the 90s. They're terrifying bad guys. They are not only physically terrifying, their songs are terrifying, their intentions are adult intentions, and they don't hold back. And I think that this was kind of a Disney studio problem where they were like, look, he's scary, but we still have to make this appealing for all of the kids and for the parents.
Yeah.
And so then you'd go into this happier, more upbeat song right after the scene. And so there was this jarringness where they wouldn't commit to threat, and then they'd lighten it up with a song that wasn't great. And then, they would just bounce there and back. So I thought that the entire lack of threat across the movie, like I really thought water was more of a threat in this movie than the bad guy.
That's true. He almost drowned.
And it was scarier.
Yeah.
Like, I thought it was objectively scarier, that it was a villain you could relate with more than the villain.
Right.
Who had pretty standard villain intentions. And he turned Scar and that whole beat was fine. But it just was wasted.
Do you feel like, how do you think the giant white lion, who I can't remember his name.
I don't remember either.
Do you think he was neutered by the direction of the story, or do you think he was neutered in the editing of the movie?
I think it was just the studio saying.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know, but
Yeah, because it seemed like they did such a good job. Character design, I would say, was on point.
he was well designed, and his intentions were fine.
The acting was great.
Oh yeah, the voice acting was awesome. I mean, I love Mads Mikkelsen. He's a a creepy guy.
I like that he was intimidating. Like you said, he's not a physical threat as far as what you actually see on screen, but he is intimidating.
He is, but he never
makes me-
shows why he should be intimidating. Like,
Right.
he doesn't do anything
And
to
that-
merit intimidation outside of being a well-designed looking bad guy.
Right, and that's what makes me think that maybe the studio or the creative people that made the movie had all the intention to
Probably.
hopefully show it.
And the studio was like,
And
nah,
the studio was
we
like,
gotta tame it down. a
nah,
little."
we gotta,
Make
we
it
can't
more
do
widely
that.
appealing.
Yeah, which is such a shame because in this movie, I think they got the tone almost there. I think
Tonally,
there
it was close, but it was a little
so
tone deaf
close.
at times. Yeah.
The music, I hate to say it, but lack of actual violence as far as what you see from the villain or the power that he actually has on display.
Because had he had like
we don't
pinned
see
another
that.
lion down himself and threatened to kill him, or
Yeah.
had like maimed someone, or had a moment in the movie where he saw sort of like Scar in the other one where he almost eats that mouse. A moment where he's like playing with another living animal and is about to kill it, but lets it go because he's distracted. Something that gives him a threatening nature outside of just being a scary white lion.
Yeah, because from the White Lion's perspective, besides the fact they were creepy, and he's like, well, I guess they ate the other dude. So that's just a bad thing on the pride, and he let that happen.
Right. He
But-
just was such an apathetic, like hands-off bad guy.
Yeah.
And he never flexed. He needed to flex.
Like
just
from
once.
from the rest of the White Lion's perspective, he might just be a good leader.
Yeah.
And
he's just charismatic.
As funny as that is, yeah, he might just be a good leader to them, which is not good for a villain.
Well, and this kind of segues into another
Well, I guess
qualm
Scar
that we
was a good
both
leader
have,
too, but yeah.
because true.
But he manipulated them.
He just had a sense of cunning that really, as an audience, you almost rooted for him.
Yeah, Scar did.
Because he wasn't. That was another thing I thought that was kind of missing until right at the very end was Scar's showing of cunning. But
Yeah.
that's not the biggest qualm in the world. He just certainly was not the most intelligent. He is a very, very cunning and conniving character in the original movie, and in this one, he just kind of was a dummy until the end, and then he was suddenly cunning. So I thought that was a little weird, but neither here nor there. It just was, I don't know. The villain was a big miss for me. The turning of Scar was cool, and his inception was cool, and all of that. But
The Scar that he got made so much sense.
it wasn't like a Nick Fury.
Yeah, oh my
like,
God.
it wasn't this cheap, like, oh, he got a scar because of what
Ironically,
the
it's a
cat's name
similar
is.
thing that caused it.
Yeah,
But
but at the very least, the sacrificial nature of how he got it
Yes.
was so why did he stay around with the pride
why? Yeah,
in
how
the
come
original
Scar's
movie?
allowed to stay around?
Exactly.
It's because he sacrificed. Well, he
He
went
redeemed
to
himself
sacrifice.
to an extent that he could be kept around.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
he still had the pettiness behind him. Yeah.
And that's why he's separated and he lives in the shadows. And Mufasa's not a fan of him, but he's still feeds him and whatever.
Right.
It makes
Mufasa takes the higher road on it. Yeah.
that twist could have been so easy to mess up, as we saw with Nick Fury. That's a perfect example.
Which just was a stupid.
It is like that's just a great question for this whole 10 years of Marvel or whatever, and they're just like cat scratch. That sucked. And here they basically take it as Scar. Before he's Scar, his name's Taka. He has a whole line where he feels like he's been betrayed. He doesn't know that that's not true. It's just that Sarabi, is that her name? Sarabi just fell for Mufasa. So anyway, he sees it from a different perspective. Taka does. And he goes to the White Lions and basically creates a cunning deal the first time we see cunning.
Yeah.
And that basically brings him to the point where they get to the new, place and the White Lions follow them. Mufasa's been betrayed
actual
by
betrayal.
Taka,
Yep.
all that stuff. And then later, Taka has a change of heart because he sees Mufasa as this young cub brother that he saved, that Taka pulled Mufasa out and saved his life. And he has a change of heart for a second, throws himself in when the killing blow was going to happen from the bad White Lion,
Right.
and effectively gives Mufasa enough time to be able to save himself. So that really was handled very
Yeah,
well, which I was
so
shocked.
too. I thought so too. Which actually, all of that leads in nicely into, I think, another problem that we had just in general, which was the music. So, for example, before you really start understanding, like Taka's love for Sarabi, there's this whole like friendship musical number. There's the musical number that they have as cubs when they, have their like kind of growing up scene. There's the musical number that happens when the Mads Mikkelsen White Lion guy takes over that one pride, and then they have to run away. There's all these musical numbers that are kind of interlaced that are, I think we both kind of agreed on this earlier, kind of 100% detracting, and in really no way aiding to the story, even to the vibe, to just generally the movie at all. They pull you out of the emotion, they pull you out of not only the scene and the style, but they're just not good.
They are 100% unnecessary.
Because Lin is great. I mean, he's got some good song credits. These aren't strongest. They're not necessary. They didn't need. I think that this movie would have benefited greatly had it had stuck to just the dramatic telling of it. And I get that the original movie has those out of character song moments, like totally. Like it has the exact same kind of darker moments with those songs that have levity to them. But it also has more intense songs, and they actually drive the plot forward. I think there were maybe 2 songs in this movie that actually developed the plot, and it was the very first one, the Brada song.
We agree that scene was montage. Great and everything. So
a growing up montage, fine, great, and it was an okay song. But then you get to like the bad guy song with the bye bye. That one was just stupid, and nothing happened. The whole song, he went up in the tree, and then he came down from the tree, and then he like walked around a few times while singing his song. Unlike Scar's song in the first movie, his villain song, where he's assembling an army of hyenas to go take down Mufasa and the Pride Lands. And it's so cool, and it has all of his, color schemes and cunningness and campiness in a conniving kind of way. This one was just not good. It was not it wasn't well written, and it didn't serve the story.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And even not comparing it to the original, obviously the original was better in the music department.
Right.
But even just taking this as its own movie. On face value, this didn't need to be a musical.
Not at all. It would have benefited greatly if it wasn't.
They already did a fantastic job of showing us why Scar feels this love towards Sarabi, even though
just the dialogue was strong.
The dialogue was actually strong. They had this interesting stuff, and you didn't really need the, like, I love her or whatever. You didn't need that because it was already shown. I think when they were on the mountain, there was something about how Sarabi figured out that Mufasa was the one that saved her from the elephants.
Yeah.
And she figures all that out, and we get to see it on camera. And they actually say that stuff, and Mufasa's denying it because he's humble and he wants Taka, his brother, to succeed and stuff because he hasn't had a moment yet and he cares about him. And all of a sudden, they need to break out of the song and repeat it.
In a less interesting way. The ice was pretty, but like
agreed. Yeah, they did
beyond that. It was literally just like how could we do a "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" kind of segment here?
Yeah. And that's another good example. I know we said just not to compare it, but
that's kind of what it was, yeah.
That song in The Lion King, the original animated one, was amazing. It showed like how they fell in love, and she sees the change in him, that he's somebody, that Simba's somebody that's worthy, and all these different things change, and it changes her mind that he needs to come back to the pride and all that.
That being said, when I was a kid, I totally skipped that scene every time. It was the most boring
Was
scene.
it the eyes? Daniel.
I don't like seductive lions.
Seductive lion eyes?
It just was so... I remember watching it on VHS, and always just the minute that scene came on, I'd just skip. I was like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I was boring as a kid. But in this regard, the end of that song in this movie, in Mufasa, did have a moment where, Scar got his little, I'm betrayed by him song. I thought that, although it also wasn't particularly well written, it at least had a place, and it drove in that point. Because I was telling you about this, that's one of my favorite things about like the Lion King Broadway show, is it gives some of the characters power ballads that are actually really good, and really informative and character driving. Like there's one that Simba gets with the longing for understanding, not being with, but like understanding what his father wants, what he's supposed to do. And it's an amazing song, and it's really powerful. This was kind of close.
Yeah.
Did it need it? No. It could have been
Right.
a glance down with him like sneering up, and then he's, looks up, camera pans over and he looks and he sees, they're down there, and he's, hatches an idea in his eyes and he goes down.
Yeah.
That could have been it.
I agree, and they did such a good job with the writing and all the other dialogue scenes that
And
I'm
it's
sure
show,
that they
don't
could
tell.
have. Yeah.
This could have been a movie of just show, don't tell.
It's interesting you mentioned the Broadway version of Lion King, because Rand and I, we recently rewatched the animated Beauty and the Beast, and then we watched the live action after that. And the only thing that was like better, it's not even better, it's just an addition in the live action is Beast's song.
Yep.
That was amazing. It fits the story. Sure, it's unnecessary because the animated one got away with it.
Right.
But it's better for it because you see him climbing to the top of the tower as she goes to the horizon, and he's trying to spend every second to see her before she's out of sight,
and
that stuff.
It's one of those things where it expresses the inner turmoil.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you can't really show with a single. I mean, you could, but you can't do it
without
fairly
just, like,
quickly.
pounding a window.
Right, because like with Sarabi and Mufasa, you can actually have them have chemistry through the movie, and then in that part where they're doing the hunting, on the mountain, you can have them have some natural chemistry to show that they're falling for each other, and have Scar witness that. But he can't really totally express what he's feeling. So in that way, yeah, I agree. It's very analogous to Beast's song, where he has, this moment of inner turmoil where he changes internally, and then it pivots forward. But that was like the only moment in this movie where there was something like that.
And the fact the rest of the movie didn't call for music, and then this one was there, it's, again, a slight miss.
Yeah.
Yeah, is how I would put it. It
Well,
wasn't a movie ending thing.
No.
It just almost there.
It didn't help. I don't think it like detracted. It didn't help though. It would have been a better movie objectively, I think, without music. But because the other song,
I agree.
yeah, the other song was the one when they were in the valley, and it was like their friendship song. They had just met Sarabi, and that whole scene was fun. And then they met Sarabi and Zazu, and they were going down after talking with Rafiki. The lions were on their tail, but for some reason they were happy-go-lucky walking through this valley, and they had this whole like "we're all friends" song. Cool, but the scene before and after that, where they were talking with Rafiki while walking into the valley, talking about the whole Malele like promised land, what all of their intentions were, and then the scene after that where Scar basically tried to make a move on Sarabi, awkwardly and all that. Those dialogue,
okay, I got you.
Yeah, those dialogue pieces were so much more valuable than that entire song. And had they had spent walking through the valley as moments for Scar and Sarabi to have more awkward interactions, or for Scar and Simba to talk more about their childhood, or something.
Scar
and Simba.
No, Mufasa.
Scar and Mufasa.
The names are hard to keep track of. They really
Taka,
are.
Taka and Mufasa. I thought that would have been more valuable because that song was fun. It wasn't a bad. I didn't think that one was a horrible song.
I'll agree with that. Yeah.
It just passed the time.
Yeah.
And it was a little too light and jovial after a scene, because right before that it showed the lions on their tail. And then they're like, da 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 da, and then there was the dialogue scenes were great, and they were well voiced and well acted and intimate and dramatic, even with a little bit of levity. But the song just was there.
Yeah. Credit where credit is due. Voice acting
Was really good.
really good.
The voice matching too.
Matching, they did a great job.
Because if you followed like Mufasa's voice to the James Earl Jones final voice, it worked.
It
if you
worked,
followed,
yes.
Scar's voice to Jeremy Irons' voice, it worked. I thought.
Yeah.
I thought the voice acting and casting was really good too.
Yeah, like we mentioned, the only one that really sticks out for me, we already don't like Timon and Pumbaa, so they're off the table.
And Zazu.
And Zazu. The only one besides that didn't really work was Taka's dad.
He was annoying.
It fine, one miss of a miscast. I'll take it.
One of the white lions too.
Oh yeah,
sounded-
was it the one of the
It was like
females that was
one of the females like on the right. She's like, "We're gonna go get the and I'm like, it's
her like sister or whatever is like intimidating.
Yeah,
and
the
she's
sister
like,
is like we're gonna do, and she's like, and we shall go to war. Every time she spoke, I'm just like,
Oh, goodness.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. The voice acting brings up my biggest disappointment of the whole movie.
Go for it.
And it's something that I don't know anything of the behind the scenes details. It's just something that I was hoping for, and I definitely could have been pulled off too, assuming that all this stuff happened. The guy who voiced Mufasa in the original is James Earl Jones.
Right.
And he unfortunately passed away last year, right? In 24?
Probably during the making of this movie.
Probably
or
during the
post-production or
making,
something.
like that. And I loved that they started it with the in memory of him. That was so appropriate, and I loved to see that. That was fantastic.
Right.
But my biggest disappointment was that his voice wasn't in it.
At all.
At all.
Did he? He didn't speak as a cloud ever, did he?
No, and that's where I think that they could have fit it in, because
Maybe it was an estate problem or something.
right, I don't know, because Kiara runs out at the end, and that's Mufasa. That's not Simba in the clouds. And if he could have just said, just remember, and that's it, even, and cut to black or cut back to Kiara like they did, whatever.
Yeah.
Just one word from him would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Not saying that I don't know anything about. You don't want to talk about the
What
rights
happened
of
with
somebody
James
who's
Earl Jones?
passed away to his voice and stuff, but it would have been amazing. And it's a disappointment. I use that word specifically because, again,
Just kind of a missed opportunity.
It's a missed opportunity, and he is an amazing actor. I don't know
An
if he's
iconic voice.
iconic. I mean, Darth Vader and Mufasa and many others.
So many others. Yeah. Yeah.
Disappointment, I think, is the appropriate word. He's absolutely beloved. He's a beloved actor, and to see him pass, especially when this movie was getting made, that was just unfortunate,
that was sad.
very sad.
Yeah.
So if there could have been a word, just remember in the clouds or something. Oh, that would have been the cherry on top.
That's true.
It's a cherry on top that's not there, so it's a disappointment. Again, don't know the behind the scenes.
I think it would have been perfect not being preachy, as the other allusions through the movie, the other tie-ins to the original movie weren't, between the phrases that people said. I mean, when they brought in the Swahili sentence.
Oh yeah, what was
somewhere
that?
it's I don't remember exactly what the translation is for all of it, but I think it's in part of the Circle of Life song. The Imwanyata and whatever that phrase is, I think was what it was.
Oh, okay.
And it's something like Long of the King or whatever. And so like things like that were not like really heavy, like, hey, nostalgia bait plugs. And I think you're right. A James Earl Jones something could have been a great way to kind of cherry on top it.
Yeah, I'm sure that there was something behind the scenes, so I don't want people to think that I'm saying like you had to do
Bring
it
him
at
back
all
from the
costs.
dead.
Yeah, we are. I don't want a Carrie Fisher thing to happen.
Yeah.
I think
don't need CG James Earl Jones.
Yeah, we can bring a lot of parallels between what's happened in the Star Wars universe and this.
And what not to do here.
Yeah, like I remember, I forget which even episode it was. Those last three just blur together as trash.
Yeah, they're also drastically different too.
Yeah, but there was one scene where they're in some cantina or something, and they find a lightsaber. You know what I'm talking
It's
about?
I think that's the second of the newest three.
Yeah.
So what is that? 7? Episode 7?
If it's the second of the newest three, it'd be 8.
8? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
7, 8, 9.
And
yeah.
they like find a lightsaber that we all know. I'm forgetting a lot of it, but
It's Luke's lightsaber.
It is Luke's lightsaber.
It's that gal who's voiced by I think Lupita Nyong'o. I think
The short yellow alien
glasses thing. Yeah.
She finds that, and
then
it
there's
opens up, and all she says ever was, "That's a story for another time." And we kind of get excited because it's like, well, maybe you don't know what's gonna happen, and nothing happened.
Yeah.
So the fact
Just
that
was a stupid plug.
there was nothing like that in Mufasa the Lion King. Nothing like that. I think the closest thing, and we might disagree on this, Rafiki getting his staff, I thought was kind of dumb.
A little bit.
Yeah.
It didn't have any meaning.
Yeah.
It was a branch that I guess kind of saved him during the Stampede, right?
Yeah, he was hanging on to it. Stampede's over,
And
and
he's
then
like,
it
"Aha!"
finally
You're
breaks.
like,
They said thank
okay.
you.
Yeah.
So I get it. It kind of goes with his character because he doesn't worry and stuff. But I don't know. I didn't really care where his staff came from. Sorry, like he could have been walking. It could have just been on the ground, and
Yeah.
I almost would have been more okay with that because it felt like the creators trying to make it something.
Yeah, it's like they had to have an answer to every question.
Yeah.
And in that case, who cares?
Not horrible. That's absolutely a nitpick.
It certainly wasn't the most appalling version of something like that I've ever seen. But I agree, it wasn't necessary. I didn't think it was insulting, but it was
Right. Not insulting, just,
you're like, all right.
whatever.
Yeah, I did think. Oh, go
Can
ahead.
we please acknowledge the lack of dung beetles? Thank the Lord.
You know what, though?
Oh my
you know
gosh.
what? Here's my controversial take.
What?
I thought the one clever and different and unique thing about the Lion King remake was the dung beetle scene. It didn't do anything for the story. It was entirely a Nat Geo style, like, here is, David Attenborough.
As
here
you can
is the
see,
dung
the
beetle.
dung beetle carries the message
But
for
it was
the lions.
it was the only thing in that movie that was different. And to that, I will give it credit that it while it wasn't necessary, it was its own thing. It was the only creative beat in that entire freaking movie that was different.
I
And
will.
to that, I appreciated it.
I accept your hot take, and the only
Disagree.
disagreement that I have is if that one scene was 15 minutes
That's
shorter.
true. It was a very long scene. That's valid.
'Cause I
you
agree,
didn't
actually.
like the Beyonce song that came right after it? What was that, Spirit or whatever it's
Beyonce
called?
song in the
Yeah, yeah.
This is how little I remember.
Right
that,
at the
'cause it
tail end of that
sucked so
song,
much.
that like the only good Beyonce song in that movie comes in. The like
Was it good?
Spirit. I think it's called Spirit.
Is it Spirit?
Yeah,
That's a great
not,
animated movie.
Not the really good
Stallion of the
animated movie.
Cimarron.
Such a good movie.
That's a good one.
With amazing music. Thanks, Hans
Yeah.
Zimmer. And Bryan Adams. Anyways, speaking of okay, this isn't totally related. I think my last qualm with the movie was a little bit the premise. I was okay with the whole story being told thing. Like, I mean, how do you initiate this? Fine. But I thought it was a little funny that Rafiki would go to telling Kiara a story about her grandfather that she didn't know before telling her a story about her dad's bravery. I feel like it would have made a lot more sense to be like, Kiara, he's leaving, but here's how you can be brave. Here's a story about your dad going through. Granted,
Right, well,
Rafiki didn't go side by side with his dad very much, but I feel like that would have made a little more sense than being like, so here's a story about your grandfather you've never met, and that have established no connection with you to him. You're like, okay, he's just the cloud daddy that I've never met. Sorry, I just was like,
Well,
but I thought that was kind of funny when he's like, well, let me tell you about your grandfather, and she's like, okay.
I didn't think of that, but the thing that you may not have thought about as well is that she could just watch the VHS.
She could.
It's right there.
She really could.
She could.
She could just be kind and rewind too.
She just be kind of rewind.
Oh yes,
No,
children of the '90s. Woo, woo.
That
We know it.
that actually is an interesting one. I didn't think about that.
That was the first thing I thought about at the beginning. Was your dad went away? Let me tell you about your story. Let me tell you a story about your grandpa,
Right.
who you've never met.
Right.
I mean, it's more relevant because he was there, as we've established. Rafiki was there through it all, but it feels like to her wouldn't matter anywhere near as much as being strong like her father.
Right.
But we've already heard that story. So
Yeah. So I guess that is the one thing. I hadn't thought about that. I would say that's the one thing that points to this as being
a little bit of a was this necessary?
yeah, that's probably the only thing. And then I guess the counterpoint would be from a babysitter's perspective. You want to talk about things. So yeah.
So
But that just gets into weird territory.
had you had made Mufasa, what would you have done in your creative way? What would you have done to make it better, do you think?
Number one is no songs. It was purely on the writers. Credit to the writers for having such good dialogue and story beats that the music became unnecessary. The tension and the drama and all that stuff was so good, and there was heart in this movie. Credit
There
to
was.
people that worked on it. The heart was there, and I would say no music. I know you can't please everybody because as soon as you take that out, everyone's gonna be like, the
But it's
original had
Lin,
this.
come on.
It's Lin. Yeah.
We love Lynn, just not here.
Yeah. Or in Hamilton. That's a hot take right there.
We won't get into that.
We won't get into
because
that.
I like Hamilton.
Oh my goodness, that'd be a fun one. But anyway, I would cut the music. That's the first thing that I would do. After that, I know it doesn't fit, and this is probably a 27. I'm 27. A 27-year-old's desire is something that you mentioned too. Is like I wouldn't have minded seeing the white lions fierceness. He had the intimidation, he had the voice acting, he had the character design, and he had the strength of his pride around him. But we only got that they eat each other, which is terrible. But we didn't see any real threat, you know, like what you were talking about. So PG-13 rating-ish, that's maybe, that's something that would have been interesting. See, Mufasa is that. And I think it could have worked too. I mean, granted, we had a lot of kids in the theater, so Disney would have made less money.
I think they could have done it in a PG rating though.
Maybe,
I mean,
yeah.
Again, you think about some of the old Disney, and you have like in Hunchback of Notre Dame, you have this preacher lusting after a gypsy who's ready to murder everyone in Paris.
Yeah.
In cold blood, and that's PG.
That's a good point.
You could get away with a little bit of thematic elementness in this one of him just like almost killing someone.
Was that made before a PG-13 rating? 'Cause what was the first PG-13 rating
I think the
movie?
second Indiana Jones.
Second
Temple
Indiana
of Doom.
Jones. When did that one come out?
87.
87
or something.
And Notre Dame was Renaissance.
I think it was
which
97 or 98.
Really?
It's
It
after
was that
Lion King.
late.
Well, because it had
That's true, the
CG. It was
CG stuff,
some of
yeah.
the first CG crowds were in Hunchback of Notre Dame.
God, you're right.
Yeah. So that one was a pioneering one too. Yeah, full-fledged Disney Renaissance, but they could get away with it.
Yeah.
The elements in that one were just mature enough that it would go over a kid's head, but they had stakes.
Yeah,
And he was scary because he was unpredictable and unrestrained. But in this, he was like, okay, I guess he's scary looking.
Yeah, the slash cut would have been good. Just
Yeah.
a slash, roar, cut to black, and now we're back on.
Implied.
It
Total implied violence would have been just fine.
Oh, shoot, Finding Nemo even. I mean, you're
Barracuda, yeah.
The Barracuda was
Yep.
threatening as heck, man.
It was.
The Barracuda is terrifying.
Yes, indeed.
I was snorkeling with them actually before Finding Nemo came out.
It's like eels. They're
We're
just,
good.
They're
Once
terrifying.
you find out the eel has that one tooth that just can't go back out,
Well, and
it
the
changes
jaw
how
that
you see
goes.
it. Yes. Oh.
Yeah.
Eels, man, and freaking barracuda. Barracuda aren't that bad, but they're bigger than you think too.
They are.
Yeah.
They're like swordfish side, aren't they?
We're gonna look
Maybe
like
not that
fish
big,
stories, but yeah, I think that they can get upwards of 6 feet, if not more. So it's like that's a me, that's a you. That's like swimming in the ocean.
Then the
It's
point
fast.
being is threatening. So, yeah.
Yeah, you see the implied violence, and then you see the results of the violence. Maybe that's what was missing too.
Result of violence?
Yeah, because we
Showing the devastation of that lion pride coming through other places and them being enslaved.
that might be part of what's missing.
He never had threat. He just
Yeah.
was there.
He's intimidating and he had power over his pride, but there was a smidge. Again, I think that he got neutered in the editing by the studio executives.
was studio
that's the
meddling.
feeling.
Yeah. Keep it PG, guys.
That's my guess. But yeah, I would say that.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would agree. On a quick side note, one thing I
Yeah.
thought that was kind of interesting was maybe it's, I don't know, in Lion King, in all of them, it's implied that the members of the, not necessarily just the pride, but like the cohorts of the pride, so like all of the other animals, have this like hunky-dory relationship with the lions, so like the we're not going to eat you relationship where, you know, they're safe and protected and whatever. What made that different with Mufasa's parents to where they weren't royalty and yet they could go to that little watering hole and they had like this great rapport with the giraffes and stuff? When they get to like their promised land, that makes some sense because he comes up there and he like asserts his dominance as the leader. He's the messiah of it. And then the other lines and stuff too, like the other one, they're actually royalty. So it would make sense that they would be, the other animals would respect them and maybe not run away. But at the beginning, I was like, is every lion pride just hunky-dory with their food in this universe? Like, is that just a thing where they don't ever have to kill members of their entourage, their kingdom, to where, like, yeah, the giraffe is like, let me help you onto this rock. Anyways, side note, that bothered me at the beginning because I'm like, well, he's not royalty, so they have no reason to need to respect him. And if anything, they should run away because they're just standard lions, right?
Yeah. Initially, I was like, because it's been documented sometimes that if there's a drought and then water shows up, everybody kind of gets along. So I was like, okay, everybody's thirsty. It just started to rain. We kind of saw that the parents were thankful for the
like
rain.
Playing in the water.
So I was like, yeah. But then when the giraffe lifts him up, it kind of broke it.
Yeah. You're like, okay.
It's like, oh, okay.
Anyways, total aside, but if I were to remake it, if I were to remake it, I think I would take the essence of the Lion King remake and exchange it with the essence of this one. I think that this one was a much better Lion King remake in the way that it brought in actually kind of all the stops of the original Lion King. It had expressive characters, it had dynamic camera movements, it had great voice acting,
Color,
decent enough songs. It was much
style.
more colorful. It had style, yeah. Stuff like that were totally in this, and I think that those would have been better suited for the original. For the remake. I think that the remake, the grittiness of it, the documentary almost of it, I think they still could have kept the expressive faces. I think that would have been good to stay. But I don't remember. Were there songs in the remake? That's how much I cared about that movie.
I don't think so.
Okay.
And maybe that's what they thought.
No, there were, because I remember Billy Eichner.
Oh, you mentioned Beyonce already. Maybe,
well, there was a
singing,
song, but in terms of like singing, I think there was at least an Hakuna Matata segment.
Yeah, you would have had to do Hakuna Matata.
So, yeah. But had they omitted the songs completely, kept this one as a completely grounded drama without the quippy side characters, you kind of have to have Zazu. That's fine. Timon and Pumbaa even could have been, had you just turned them the heck down. I think it would have been better without him. And directed this one as a gritty, serious take where it was all about the script. It was all about the voice acting because it was there. But it just got derailed by Disney just being like, no, we got to make this a musical because musicals perform better in theaters and we got to make this kind of sanitized. I wouldn't have gone so far as maybe PG-13, but certainly dialing up the thematic elements a little bit more, turning up the violence a little bit, or the implied violence, and just making it more of a drama, because that's what made me so excited about this movie when it first came out. I was like, cool, we're going to get because Lion King is always been an amazing movie, but a true drama, it never has been. Like, it's not Hamlet. I mean, it is Hamlet, but it's not Hamlet in terms of the gravity of it. It has those moments. And so that's one of the things that the Broadway musical does well, is it brings some of that back and some of the realism of it all. And so had this had been just like a focused, character-driven story, no musical, minimal quippy characters, grounded in actual camera movements, I think that would have made it good. I thought that even the scored music was good. It had a lot of callbacks to the themes, callbacks to the Hans
when
Zimmer
Kiara
stuff.
ran up the mountain right at the end, that was perfect.
Well, and the fact that they brought in, even with the Lin music, they brought in Lebo M again, so the gentleman who does a lot of the African music and the Swahili and everything too, which was amazing. So it had the same feel.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so they could have, I think the scored music was fine. They brought back the whole King of Pride rock theme, and so there were callbacks there to the Hans Zimmer music, which was cool. But beyond that, just ditch the singing, ditch the weird camera movements, and just tell a compelling story. And this would have been right there. So yeah, I don't know, maybe that leads us well into our categories. We can introduce what our grading categories are.
Yes, indeed. So now we're going to move on to our different categories.
These 6 categories help us objectively measure the quality of the film. We have each chosen 3 that we feel are most important to us. And so they're categories that we feel and should be embodied in pretty much every movie in some way, shape, or form, even if it's a little bit subjective. So we'll pull up these categories here, and these will likely show up on Letterboxd too, to show our rating structure and why we went the way we did. So without further ado, our categories are
uniqueness, cinematography, story, execution, immersion, emotional connection. Those are the 6. 3 of those were chosen by Daniel, 3 were chosen by me. It's basically designed to have both of our opinions come together to give a total score for each movie, to balance each other out depending on our opinions.
These are the 3 things we chose are the 3 things we think are most important in a movie and in a story. So
yeah, I think your 3 were the uniqueness, cinematography, and story.
Probably.
Pretty sure. So uniqueness, the idea is, have I seen it before?
Is this a new story? Is it a story worth telling because it's different? Or does it bring something to the table that merits a new story or a story in general? And I think it hits the mark.
Yeah.
I think it was an interesting story, although it's definitely a predictable one. It's nothing revolutionary in terms of the story, but it was told in a convincing way and in a refreshing kind of way, I thought.
Yeah, worth telling. One thing I didn't mention before was that the only problem with having a prequel is that you can guess things really easily. Like, I actually was disappointed that I figured out that Taco was Scar when they were just kids.
Did you not know that?
I mean, like, I didn't go in knowing it. You know, the coloring kind of made sense. The
You don't know the
callback with
Lion
the
King
claw.
lore.
I don't know the Lion King lore as much.
That's okay.
But like for somebody who's not up on it, like me,
Yeah.
to be able to figure it out too quickly was
Right. Mm-hmm.
unfortunate. But that's just the nature of it.
Nature of prequels, yeah.
Yeah, I would say it was unique.
Well, and it was a story worth telling. I mean, that's also a thing that prequels suffer with, and even just a lot of movies nowadays. Is it a story worth telling? And I mean, that's kind of the problem with the whole like live action remake movement.
Yeah.
And you know, we see it now with like the new How to Train Your Dragon, or like they're
Yeah,
great
that's gonna
movies.
be-
Don't get me wrong.
I don't know.
And I'm sure it's going to be well made and everything, but like, is it necessary with Snow White? Like, is it necessary with a lot of these? And like some of the Disney live action remakes have been decent. Like I kind of liked Aladdin. I liked Jungle Book because at the very least they put a new spin on it.
Yeah.
To where it was just a different kind of movie.
Yeah,
but
like, I
if you
don't
look
hate
back at
Beauty and the Beast, actually.
yeah, I have my qualms, but
Definitely.
as a whole, it was much more like the Broadway show. Which
Cinderella.
was cool. Cinderella was
Actually,
good. Cinderella was
surprisingly.
good. Mulan was garbage.
Yes.
And
Didn't
Lion
even
King
see
was
it, but
garbage.
yes.
Oh, so they went so full-fledged, like make it super unique that it just was really bad.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother story.
All right, so the next one that you
yeah.
put down was cinematography.
I thought the cinematography for it was pretty. I mean, again, a huge shout out to the VFX artist. It was gorgeous. And I think the cinematographer really leaned into the strengths of the VFX artist. Like the fact that they were able to meld so many different mediums with, you know, the fact that the lions not only looked photorealistic and the fur was gorgeous, but everything down to the detail of like dilating eyeballs, you know, breathing nose, the wet noses, and that the cinematographer understood the strengths of the models, but then like how it interacted with water and snow. Like even though there was that really weird aquifer in Pride Rock, when they were falling into it, you had this gorgeous, you know, ultra wide shot with the light rays coming through, and heck, even like the tree, which totally it has to be the Tree of Life from Animal Kingdom. It looked exactly like it. The Tree of Life tree, when it was revolving around it and everything, had the light rays coming through, and so I think cinematography was certainly at the forefront of this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you consider that you might be giving it points off for the crazy camera moves? Do you think that those were so distracting points?
See,
I know we're going to talk
that's
about
a
this
tricky one.
separately and then
Because
go
like if you
later.
frame it for like a Robert Zemeckis movie, which is like the best way I could think of it, there are a lot of his movies that are really not great or are really good, and they have some of the camera movements, and I can give them a pass because they're revolutionary for their time, or they're, you know, a storytelling element that just gives it a little more motion. I could pardon them. I think they were generally not necessary, but I don't think that they pulled you out a few times, but I don't think ever in a way that I cared about a whole lot. So I guess if it were like tons of points we were throwing out, I'd maybe take a couple, but I wouldn't say that it killed it for me, no.
For sure.
So I admired it more from the technical standpoint of why did they choose to do that shot? Because it looked really freaking cool. And honestly, I can relate to that.
Next thing that you had put down, your third and final one, was story.
Yeah, without a good story, you just can't have a good movie. That has to be the first thing, and a lot of movies forget that. The story for this one, I thought merited being told. I thought it was compelling and interesting, fairly unique. It was a pretty typical story structure, but aren't they all? I think the story would have been stronger without the music, as we've discussed, but I think it was a good story. I didn't think that there were any major holes. I think that they buttoned up the whole, you know, backstory of all of these characters fairly well and with intention. So yeah, I think the story was pretty strong. I don't think it was anything insanely revolutionary, but for a prequel, for a like live action remake, it was good. I thought it was definitely one of the stronger entries into the whole live action movement.
So correct use of IP.
I think so. And I think that when it came out as a movie that was being produced, it actually had some interest, at least for me, and I think for the public, that it was a movie and a story worth investing in. It wasn't a sigh. It was oh, that's interesting. You know, in a respected kind of franchise at this point. So I think the story was pretty darn good.
Perfect. The first one that I had put down and the fourth one on our list of points to give was execution. Execution comes from basically the idea that Movies sometimes don't have the biggest budgets. Sometimes they might not have the ability to hire the best writers.
What's the budget for this one?
That's a good question. But execution allows us to give points to movies purely based off of whether we thought they pulled off their idea or not. If you have something that's super trippy or even something that could be pretty casual, but then they interject something that messes it up, we have execution to be able to take points or give points. So yeah, that's why execution's in there. The second one that I put on, number 5 out of 6, is immersion. And that's basically the idea of, did you start looking around or snoring while you were watching the movie in the theater?
Were you bored at any time?
Were you bored?
Yeah. Were you captivated by what you were seeing?
Were you captivated? Was it something that got your attention? Did you actively check the time? That kind of goes into editing and everything, but immersion is a good one that encompasses everything, because if you start to get pulled out of it, well, you didn't really get transported to that other world that theater movies are meant to do for you. So that's what immersion's for. The sixth final one, and the last one that I put on there, was emotional connection. This is one just giving to either of us, so if we disagree, we can give points or take points away. That if, let's say it was something that had a great story, the cinematography was awesome, and they executed it well, but it was bland as heck, then we can balance it out with the emotional connection. Likewise, we all have those childhood favorite movies that really speak to us, and they might be crap, but we have that emotional connection. For whatever reason, it just did something in here. So that's why emotional connection is on
Well,
there.
in the way I see emotional connection too, I think that's a great sort of like story. It kind of needs to apply in some way to pretty much every movie, because in terms of, you know, some movies are meant to, I guess overarchingly, a good movie, or really a movie in general, is meant for you to feel something. It can be disgust, it can be anger, it can be happiness, it can be joy or elation or something. At the end of the day, movies are a medium to make you feel something, or make you identify with characters or with circumstances. And so in that way, that's, you know, part of the mean of pulling you away from the world and into a different one. And I think that you know, if you can step back and acknowledge, and in this one I think we can, that we were able to connect with characters, that we could feel some sorrow when they felt sorrow, that we could feel joyful, you know, with them when they were joyful. It checks the box, right? So at least it did for me. I thought that there was, you know, fair investment in the characters. You generally cared about their well-being, and you left feeling satisfied that, you know, Mufasa essentially completed his arc, that, you know, you now have answers to why Scar is Scar, and you can understand his character more. And so at the end of the day, it elicited a response.
I would agree with that. So right now we're going to, we'll basically do a cut. All right, so here's our scoring system. We did a little bit of math. Again, this is the first one of these that we've ever filmed. So we have 6 different categories. Each category is going to have a maximum of 5 points per category. Daniel and I will each give our individual scores separately per category. We will take the total of all of the added up scores per category, and that will give us a number. Once we have that number, we will each take the average. We will divide them by 6, the number of categories. Then we will take that number, add Daniel's score and my score together, divide that by 2, because there are 2 of us giving a score, and that will give us our letterboxed out of 5-star rating for the movie.
So 6 categories to 5 stars is the name of the game. So if you didn't follow any of that, trust us, it'll come out as a 5-star rating. So
Indeed.
Or as a 5-star scale.
So the first thing that we need to rate is uniqueness.
Excellent. So I gave, to preface, both of us only ever really give, you know, 5 points if something is basically perfect. If it is the, you know, whether it's like subjectively somewhat perfect, or at the very least we have kind of a emotional, you know, bit that we really like. So for Mufasa, I gave it a 3 in terms of uniqueness. I didn't think it was the most unique thing I have ever seen in my life, but it certainly was unique. I thought it was pretty down the middle in terms of being unique. Nothing extraordinary, but not bad.
Yeah, I would agree. I would give uniqueness a 3.5. I think that taking an already existing IP is not that unique, so that's why it doesn't really get anywhere near in the 4s or even close to a 5. But I think that it was unique enough within the IP that it wasn't just a random reboot like all the Star Wars stuff has been. Basically, that wasn't a reboot. That's actually a huge part, or an unnecessary prequel. This, I think that the uniqueness was up there, so I gave it a 3.5 with only points deducted for the fact that it was an already existing IP. We'd love to see more movies that are actually new.
Okay, second category, cinematography. After you.
Cinematography, I gave it a 4. I thought that it was gorgeous. The first opening shot really struck me, actually. I thought that it was fantastic. I thought that all the shots, except for the Zemeckis shots, were really, really good. It was beautiful to look at not in a cliche way. A lot of people say that things are just beautiful to look at because it had expensive VFX. This was beautiful to look at because they did a great job with the cinematography. Camera placement, choices like that. There were a couple stylistic that I just didn't agree with. But in general, it was great to look at. A lot of the camera moves serve the story too. So yeah, I gave it a 4. I thought it was filmed very well. Fake filmed.
Yes. I also gave it a 4, slightly different reasons though. It was definitely pretty. It was definitely a feast for the eyes. There were a handful of shots that didn't serve the story, that pulled you out. And I think that as a cinematographer, you've kind of failed a little bit if you have too much attention pulled to it. I mean, your main job is to make the look of the movie, is to make, ultimately what people are watching, take the director's vision and make it visual. And so in that way, I mean, if that was the director's vision, then I guess they passed. But in terms of just subjectiveness, it was very pretty. But I would say that not every single shot totally served the story. There was definitely some weird stuff in there. Not to an extent that it really knocked it down, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 4 is very fair for that. It was above average, and there was intention and heart. It was good. After cinematography, we have story.
All right. For story, I went ahead and put a 3. Like Matthew said, it's difficult to make a story for an existing IP that's compelling and good, and I think for that way they did it. It was a pretty standard story arc. It wasn't anything super revolutionary. It didn't really need to be, granted. But it was predictable. It was safe. It was a safe story arc. Generally, the fact that both of us were able to, bring similar movies into the same sentence as this one, being like, yeah, that was a lot like Princess Bride, or that was a lot like Secondhand Lions, or that was a lot like, heck, Moses. There's definitely quite a few borrowed story beats. It's the typical kind of power struggle between prides. I mean, what else are you going to do in a Lion movie, I guess? But I thought the story was not super, super original, but it wasn't bad. It did what it needed to do. I just didn't think it was outstanding.
I'm glad you went first on that one because you actually changed my mind a little bit. I had gotten the execution and story mixed up a little bit. So story, I had it at a 4.5, I think, actually, but I realized what I was liking was the execution, so I just changed my scores slightly. Okay. Anyway, my official score for story is 3.5. I thought the fact that they were able to tell a prequel to a character that we all loved and all of that was really well done. I thought that they did a good job of incorporating all the themes, making it feel like it was a part of the universe, even though it's not. As far as style goes, it's completely different. But I think that, even though it was pretty bland, as far as like if you wrote it down on paper, I thought that it was good and it was entertaining and it kept me engaged. So I'd say story, 3.5.
Excellent. Okay, our next category is execution.
Yes, execution, the one that I just changed to. Woo-hoo. Execution, I really was impressed, to be honest. I thought that the execution on this was great. They've hit that fine line of the emotions within the mouth and the faces of the lions. Singing doesn't work with lion mouths. It just doesn't. Rafiki actually worked because he has a monkey face, so it's closer to ours. But yeah, lion singing doesn't work. Besides that, I'd say execution was a 4.1. I really, really liked it.
Okay. I'm just under you with a 4.
Hey!
I thought it was, for what it was very well executed. I was pleasantly surprised that I liked it. I was not expecting to really like it. But what really totally killed it for me was the massive misstep of the music. The tonal shifts that were created because of the music really kind of killed it for me. So I wouldn't say masterpiece. I didn't think that the music killed it to a point that it was unwatchable, but it certainly was distracting. So while I thought it was executed well, it was not perfection. So 4.
Absolutely. The next score that we have is immersion.
All right. Immersion, I also gave it a 4. I was transported to the world. It was a convincing world. It was a pretty world. Generally speaking, the logic within it was tight enough for what it needed to be. You were invested in the characters. They were well voiced. It was pretty to watch. While I did check my watch on a few scenes, just because they kind of were not super flowy or quick in any way, I was sucked in and generally immersed.
Yeah, I am just above you on that one with the 4.2. Right. Same thing. There was really only a couple times. I think it was that shot, something Requiem is what the shot's called.
Yeah, for the straight on.
But yeah, the straight on, that killed my immersion every single time it happened. So for that, it doesn't get above a 4.2. But I wasn't looking at my watch. I didn't leave the theater thinking, man, they could have cut fat off of that for sure. Immersion is a 4.2 for me.
Excellent. All right. Then we've got emotional connection.
Yes. Emotional connection. I'm giving it a 3.6. Okay. Not a crazy high score. I still really like the movie. It really was worth the watch. If anybody's thinking, I would say it's worth the watch. But the emotional connection, you're in an existing IP that has the first movie making people cry all the time. Whether it's the cloud scene or him discovering himself or something with Rafiki, specifically the remember who you are, all that stuff. And it just didn't get near that for me. So for emotional connection, it was great. The animals are absolutely adorable. But yeah, just a 3.6. Yeah, it made me happy. There was a little bit of like, oh, that's a sad thing that happened. Oh, there's betrayal. Yeah. But it didn't go beyond. So 3.6 for me on emotional connection.
Excellent. Okay. I was a little bit higher. I think it did what it needed to do. I think it squared away all the characters as it needed to. I could relate to all of them in a way that I needed to relate to them. So, I could understand why they were doing what they were doing. And I thought they were well acted and everything. So I think while it was maybe not a strong connection, I think there was certainly an emotional connection to where the characters, I could understand the characters generally and feel something for each one of them in a different way. All except the villain, who was just weak. So maybe that's the reason it's not a 5. So, all right. You have your final score? I've got mine here.
Yes, since I made that change, I am adding them up as we speak.
Okay. My final score out of 5 stars is a 3.6. Meaning that we will round to the nearest half star. So my final score is a 3.5 stars for Mufasa.
My final score for Mufasa is 3.8166 repeating.
I think we're going to get a 3.5 for Mufasa tonight.
I think so. What was yours again?
3.6. So 3.6 plus 3.8 will be like 3.7. So it might be 3.75, in which case we'll have to figure out if it goes to 4 stars or not.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, all we have to do is divide this number by 2, and we have our official score for our first movie that we've ever reviewed on this video cast.
Yeah.
I like that. So, Mufasa, we gave you some notes, and your final score is a 3.74165.
All right, 3.5 stars.
Yep, 3.5 stars.
All right.
Yep. If it was a 3.75, it would have rounded up. So yeah, 3.5 stars on Letterboxd. Our official score, to be very precise, 3.74165.
We love our decimal points.
We love our decimal points here. But anyway.
Well, this has been a fun time. Fun journey. And we will be doing this every Tuesday is when we shoot.
Every
reviewing
Tuesday
a movie, watching whether it's a new movie or an old one.
Absolutely. So we'll be at Allen Theaters sometimes on Tuesdays. Otherwise, if there's a movie that we want to watch, I'll be at an apartment
we'll just
something.
Be watching it, just the two of us. So, yeah, this has been a fun journey, and we will continue making this if you guys enjoy it. We appreciate you being along on this journey with us as filmmakers, as film lovers. We love being able to see what's out there, being able to talk critically about story, being able to talk just between each other on what we like and what we don't like. So join us every week. We're hoping to do this regularly, and definitely leave some comments below and let us know what you'd like to see, whether it's movies or suggestions.
Yeah,
this
and
movie.
let us know what you think of this first one. Like Daniel was saying, this is our first time doing this. But let us know what you think of this. Let us know if you want this to be in a podcast form on Spotify. Of course, we have the audio files. Absolutely. And let us know what day works for releasing. We're going to start on Fridays if that works for us. Again, this is the first time, so there's going to be a lot of things that we're figuring out.
Catch us on YouTube for now.
Yep, catch us on YouTube every Friday. And yeah.
Excellent.
That's pretty much it.